During that time in the police, I met a lady which was a psychometrist. We used psychometry, and I tested psychometry extensively and found a few interesting points where, for instance, that if one used a photograph to do psychometric reading, the more photographs of the same person you put together, the stronger the signal would be, the more information they're able to get out. And we looked at that information, and I tested it by actually following it up. Some cases it was so, some cases it wasn't. What seemed to be very clear was that the person reading the information had a definitive impact on what information would come through and how they interpreted it. And therefore it is quite a difficult thing, and that it seems like there was some kind of barrier. You could only get certain information. Up to that stage, at no time, and I had then sessions with my father-in-law as medium several times a week. So I was fortunate I had my own full-time deep trance medium. In the beginning, we could not trance without the generation of energy. We used a church organ sound, the organ sounds of church music to generate energy. Then the beings will come through to talk, the people from the afterlife, one after the other, and we would record the sessions, and for about an hour they can continue, and then the energy would drop, and they would say the energy is dropping. Eventually, what they said normally is you need quite a number of people in a group together that talks the whole time to generate vibrations so that the beings can actually speak through the body. Now, in a deep trance medium, for instance, when the being comes through, the person who's in the body actually disappears. They do not remember a thing. This one event, I learned something fascinating, because at one stage my father-in-law wanted to die. He tried to get out of the body, and I was instructed how to bring him back into the body, and what they call pull him back. And it was very clear that he was outside his body, and that they had to get him back inside his body. So from that perspective, I understood that it was possible to leave the body. I didn't really understand at that stage the impact of that particular event, but I did as they showed me what to do, and I pulled him back into the body. His wife was there as well. She was with, and the two of us together put him back in the body, and he was very angry because he wanted to die. He wanted to leave the body, and he said to me, "You cannot trust anyone in heaven." He says, "You can trust no one." To me, that was like strange. I did not believe him. I thought he was simply just angry because he had to do things in the war that he felt heaven should never have put in front of his door. And he blamed heaven for those choices he had to make. And so from my perspective, he was simply angry, and that his form of revenge was directed at the spirit world for what happened in the Second World War. Because in the Second World War, he had to make a choice between two friends of different sides of the war, and he had to kill one of them to protect his men. And he had to slit the throat of the being because it was in the danger zone behind the lines, so he was absolutely disgusted with having to do that. So in the exposure, obviously now, with discussing with many beings, some hundred that's been on Earth hundreds of years ago, and then they would discuss their existence. One being that came through a lot was a Keizer Wilhelm van Hohenzollern from Byron. He came through, we had many discussions with various beings. None of the discussions though ever would be awfully spiritual, although some would come through and pray. For instance, Paul Kruger used to be the president of Virginia or Transvaal a long time ago, would come and pray for his people. And they would talk about God as the white light, in whose face you cannot stand, you cannot face it, the light is too bright. So I was intrigued by that because the God was depicted as the light.
Have you ever heard of God as a white light?
Never particularly, although yes, there is mentionings of that in the Bible, God as light. I studied the Bible quite extensively. So by the time I finished in the police, I've had 4.5 years of regular channelings, on average about an hour and a half at a time. I've seen various phenomena, for instance, where with a single movement a cat would become, without any life force, the cat would turn like into a fur that you can, they would place over my arm and it will fold over my arm. There was a particular fear about cats, so they wanted cats not to be close to the deep trance medium. They said it interferes with the ectoplasm. There was also a point of light. The channel couldn't bear bright light at all. So it had to be done in semi-darkness. Bright light would cause extensive pain to the body. Also, meat was not allowed to be eaten. For being eaten meat, they would throw up. And obviously my father-in-law deliberately tried to eat meat to try and stop the gift or the skill or the ability to channel. But he was a healer, so...
Did he have a specific group that sort of constellated around him?
Nothing. He did not want to have anything to do with it. After his studies, he did not form any groups. Nobody came to him. He did no readings for anyone. He was basically just a healer, doing healing using homeopathy. When I came on the scene, it seemed to have activated all of those things again. If I have a headache, for instance, I'll go to him and then he put his hands on me to take the headache away. He could do shit like that. He would go into trance. They demonstrated, for instance, for cataleptic paralysis, where the body turns into a statue. So you're standing there like a statue, you can't move it, which is fascinating. Moving things like closing doors, opening doors, using ectoplasm. They basically use ectoplasm for that. The ectoplasm, what was explained to me is that ectoplasm was not in the same quantity in all bodies. Some people carry more ectoplasm and they become deep trance mediums. He was born with the ability. It was not something that he was trained in. He predicted the application of the King of England many, many years ago, and that happened as a child, and therefore because that happened, that prediction, they called him the prophet, because he made predictions that, for instance, like that can happen.